Hello and welcome to the Empowered Women's Project, a podcast and community made by women for women to help you live your best life and reconnect you back to the things that really matter. Today, I am joined by beautiful and special guest, Yvette Peterson, as she shares her life's journey and some of the realizations that she has come to realize after the experience of being vulnerable or not. And I don't know about you, but we hear the term our vulnerability can be our greatest strength, but a lot of us can see it as weakness, whether it's the way we were raised as a child, whether it's certain situations where we've needed to be tough and strong. But I think as women, often it's easy for us to feel that if we are showing emotions, that actually is a sign of weakness. And as you hear through Yvette's story, what she's been through, and some of the realizations that she's had, you're going to learn so much, not only about yourself, your own journey, but how you want to show up in the world as a woman, expressing all emotions and realizing that it's all perfect. So I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. Let's jump in. Well, hey everyone, I'm really excited to have a beautiful woman joining us on today's episode of our podcast, Yvette Peterson. Welcome to the podcast, Yvette.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm really super excited to be here today.
So, Yvette, I'm really excited to hear more about your story because as we were chatting before we just hit record, just some of the lessons that, many people have gone through crazy ups and downs in their life, right? And sometimes those ups and downs can stick with us for a while. And sometimes we can look back and realize that they have served us in some way, or that person has served us in some way. But in the moment, it doesn't always feel like that either. And, in the nature of our Empower Women's Project podcast, we really love speaking about the journey of life and the lessons that we learn. So I know you've got lots to share with us today, and I'm really excited for that. I would love you maybe to start at the start, just so that everyone gets a little bit able to know you. I know that you're not originally from Australia, so why don't you go back to when you were little?
Sure. Well, yes, no, I think my accent is a little bit like a stray dog. It depends who I'm speaking to. But I'm originally from South Africa. My kids, for the most part, are Aussies, and so that comes in a bit. And then my husband is American, so that comes in a bit. So if it wanders during the course of our chat, then that's what's going on. But yeah, so originally born and raised in South Africa. I immigrated to Australia when I was, I think 30, something like that, with my ex-husband and our child. She was 2 at the time. And then separated when we were here, and then met my beautiful husband, Brian, who is absolute inspiration to me, and then had our little girl, Savannah, who's 10 now.
Beautiful. So mama to two girls.
Mama to 2 girls, one who's 19 now and one who's 10.
Amazing. And I know health and wellness is a really big passion for you, and your husband Brian's a chiropractor as well, so it's definitely your space that you love. And we were chatting before, and I think vulnerability is an interesting topic, isn't it? Where we're growing up, I know for me, I was in a family where it was pretty okay to share our emotions, crying, angry, tears, whatever it might be. But it's interesting because growing up with then my husband, his family is German and Yugoslav, and emotions, in that space is very, very different. And it's always interesting to me learning and hearing other people's stories of what childhood was like, what was allowed, what was normal, what was frowned upon. And for you, with what you've shared with me, growing up for you, vulnerability was just not a thing. Like you just were a tough little cookie. Am I right?
Yes, and I guess that's followed me for most of my life, to the point that I've realized in reflecting on talking today with you that I actually had almost a phobia around emotion and showing emotion. And I think that's because I've always been a really empathetic person, a really intuitive child, and so I feel other people's emotions, both happy and sad, really strongly. And so I guess for me, I have realized that for a lot of my life, I avoided any emotion or emotional connection whatsoever, to the point that I would even, my wedding vows to my husband, Brian, were purposefully the strict wedding vows. We didn't write our own because I did not want to cry. That was really important to me. And even hugging my children, they always would go, "Mom, don't do the pat, pat, hug," which is literally, I would hug them for 3 seconds and that emotion would become too much and I would pat, pat, and we have to move on.
Wow.
And so I kind of have avoided, like, no sad movies. I only watch comedy and action. Like, I literally tried to avoid emotion at any point in my life. And I think that stemmed, I guess, from when I was little. And again, reflecting on this, I've really realized that throughout my life, everything that kind of happened that in the moment was really overwhelming and difficult set me up for something else so that I could cope better. And so I guess going right back, I guess, around the health, when I was very little, and for most of my life, I haven't had very great health. I used to have very, very severe ear infections. And so from as long as I could remember, I've had 14 pairs of grommets, blown eardrums, whatever. I only have 60% of my hearing because of it. And so I think having that as a really little child, I learned how to take myself out of that pain to another place. And I kind of like kick my legs really quickly or whatever, and refocus my brain to somewhere else where I was away from the pain that I was feeling.
Yes.
Which doesn't sound great, but I also had quite a disciplined childhood. So corporal punishment was a large part of my childhood and growing up. And so with that, I kind of realized a few things. One, that there was no way to stay out of trouble because I would, things like, I guess as an example, I used to have to like recite my times tables every day. If I got one wrong, I used to get punished for that. If I spoke a sentence and didn't put the person's name I was addressing at the end of the sentence, I would get punished for that. All sorts of things. Anyway, there was no way to avoid that. I couldn't get away from it. And also that nobody was going to protect me. There was no one that was coming to save me from that. I had to kind of deal with it myself. And so I think as a little person, and as still in that space, I felt kind of powerless. And the only way that I felt that I could take some power back to myself was to not show emotion in those situations. So for me, I was like, it doesn't matter what happens, I will not cry. Right. That's my power. So
kind of like not letting them win. Like you can't.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, right. And so that was my power. I will not cry. And so that kind of, the thing that I learned with the ear infections, really, to take myself to a different place, helped me in that space where I would be able to control my emotion, take myself somewhere else, not cry. But then I felt that because of the way that I was, as empathetic as I was and intuitive about other people's emotions, that got harder. And so I ended up building almost a phobia of emotion. And I actually didn't cry for probably over a decade at all, for any reason whatsoever. Funnily enough, though, if I think of my childhood, I didn't have a sad childhood. I was still a happy child. Yes. I think my friends, some of them who I have now, still would not remember me as a sad child or depressed child or whatever. I think I learned how to kind of compartmentalize my life, I guess, into different areas, and find the things to be happy about every day, in whatever was going on. And so, I would be looking for things to make me happy, I guess almost as an avoidance, because I could if I was happy, then that was great and that's where I was.
Yes.
And then, if something happened that I was not happy about, or, that something happened that upset me, I could quite easily take myself out of that back to a happy place and move on and leave that behind.
Can I just say, I think that although you might look back and go, oh, I didn't necessarily feel emotion and for that period of time, that was quite an amazing strategy that you set up as a young child to help, dissociate from pain or from certain situations. Like that really would have served you in so many different ways. It's just, I think when we live that for life versus for moments, then that's when, it just becomes a muscle that we've used probably too much, and then it becomes like normal. But I think, as a little one, for you to have worked that out and found out how you can kind of, win or have that control in your own space, that's really amazing.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things too, that even though in that time was hard, as I went on through my life, it served me again, because I then, my brother and my sister were born, so they're 15 and 16 years younger than me. And I met a man who I thought was lovely. I used to get flowers every week and lots of attention. And, only later did I realize that it was really odd that this person knew where I was all the time. As soon as I arrived home, my phone would ring and my mom would go, that's really weird. But anyway, and I thought he was lovely. And my parents then, some tragedy happened within our larger family. And my parents decided it was not safe to stay in South Africa any longer. And so they decided to immigrate to Australia. And at that point, I was living with this man and had a really, really good job. And so I wasn't dependent on my parents, and I couldn't, and at that point didn't think it was a great idea for me to immigrate with them. So they left for Australia and they left me behind. I got married, and only after that realized that the person that I had married had some pretty severe mental health issues, I guess. And so then life went on a completely different tangent, where some days were amazing and we'd go for 6 months and everything would be great. And then everything would just flip. And so without my family there, it was just me and I guess my ex-husband's family. And so whenever anything happened and I would want to leave, I would get pressure from all sides in order to stay. And so my ex-husband, unfortunately, when things get overwhelming, so if something happens and I'm going to leave now, his emotions would cause him to have seizures. And so then he would be in hospital, and then everybody would go, well, you can't leave now because whatever. And so there was kind of years of multiple affairs. I'm not even sure how many in the end. Guns going off next to my head, like crazy stuff. I fell pregnant and had my daughter, who's 19 now, and realized that I had to get to my family, because there was no way that I was ever going to be safe, and my child was going to be safe. A, in South Africa, things were getting pretty rough. And B, my ex-husband had made it quite clear that if I had tried to leave with her, something bad would happen to me, or my child would be taken away. And at that point, there were some pretty unsavory characters that he was around. And so I did not doubt that that was possible. And so again, in that was that compartmentalizing my life, because at the same time, in my job and with the people that I was working with, some of them who I am still friends with now, a lot of people did not know what was going on. I was able to go to work. I was in a managerial position. I had a lot of people that I was trying to take care of. I was very young, only in my early 20s, and a lot of the staff that worked for me and with me were a lot older than me and men. So controlling my emotions worked in that situation, because certainly back then, women in business, you can't be emotional, right? You have to be. So I was that worked. That was great. And also, I would still have to look for the happy in every day. So no matter what's going on, I've just found out that my husband's having an affair, but I can't leave, and he's in the hospital, and blah, 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 whatever's going on. I still have to find the joy in every day in order to carry on, because that's the goal, right? You have to keep moving forward. I guess, has always been my focus. Like, okay, that didn't work. What's next? So my parents managed to find an amazing friend who was able to sponsor us to come to Australia. And so we did. And it didn't take a year before my ex-husband was fired, I guess, from that position. I think some of the issues that he struggles with, and just sometimes just, I guess, the way that he is, it was not really happy working. Like, was not a great thing. And then in order to stay in control of his emotions, plus the womanizing and all that stuff, like, it didn't work well. Like, and anyway, so just before Christmas one year, he lost that job. And so we basically had a very short period of time to figure out what to do before immigration found out, and we're out, right? And in that time, I think, is when he realized too that if I had left him, I would have to leave the country. That little switch flicked on. And so when we found a new sponsor, the behavior really kind of escalated, because he knew I was really trapped there. I really couldn't leave. Even though my family was right there, I couldn't leave. I'd have to leave the country if that happened. And so I realized very quickly that another plan had to be made in order to make sure that my daughter and I were safe here. And so we found another way to get permanent residency. And I was hopeful after the residency that we would be able to, things would change. Like, I kept waiting for things to change, right? Because you go for, anybody who's been in a relationship with somebody like that will know that for a while things are really great. And when they're great, they're amazing. And then you keep hoping that whatever that thing is that they do is not going to happen again.
Yes.
Anyway, didn't take long before I realized that, well, essentially what happened was one New Year's, I went to, we were not going to go out that night. I suddenly felt really odd. I don't even know how I ended up in bed. But at about midnight was woken up by a friend of mine texting me and realized that he had drugged me in order to go out with one of his girlfriends. So he'd made me a drink and said, oh, we're going to Happy New Year, whatever. And from that point, I don't remember anything. And so I realized then, okay, like, this is going to get, at some point, this is really going to go bad. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So eventually, essentially what I did was I just, at that point, went, okay, it's never going to change. We then got our immigration permits. We were able to stay. I asked for a copy of the mobile phone records, and there were like hundreds of calls and texts to another person. And so I was like, okay, that's it. I'm out. I'm gone. And I moved into my parents' house. And my parents my dad really is the only person, I guess, that could stand for me in that time, which is interesting because that also kind of was the switch in our relationship, myself and my dad. And so now we have an incredible relationship, I guess, and I love him very much. He will do anything for my kids and myself. But anyway, so I moved in with them. And again, even though things were really difficult, my ex-husband was not giving up easy, didn't for very many years. I was still able to move forward. And again, I think all those lessons that I learned in my childhood, really just around something that I still do. It's just being grateful in every day for finding the little things, that you can be joyful about. And just looking for those blessings just in everyday life, because there's so many of them all over if you look for them. Sometimes you just have to look a little harder. Anyway, so that happened. And then I was working for my parents. I didn't go back into the original position that I had in South Africa. I'd been working for my folks. And my mom, I don't know if she read the book or she watched the movie of The Secret. Mm-hmm. So the one day, it wasn't a very busy day, and she came and said, oh, we're going to write a list of this man that we're going to find for you. And I was like, Mom, I'm not looking for anybody. it had been 2 years that I'd been single, hardcore single, like not even looking guys in the face. Like you're not going, don't ask me out for dinner. I didn't want to be one of those single moms who like every few months is a different person through your kid's life or whatever. Like that was not going to be me. And so I simply just didn't date anybody. And I think too, I was just so grateful to have a place that was mine for the first time, because I literally moved out of my parents' home in with my ex-husband.
Yes.
So this was the first time I had a place that was my sanctuary, and where I could come home and there was peace. And so for me, like peace was massive, to find that quiet space where I didn't have to worry about anybody else. Nothing could affect that. It was my little bubble with my child. And I wasn't really keen on anybody, coming into that at that point, and not having to like pick up after anybody else or whatever. So that I was really protective. Anyway, so she said, we're going to make this list. So I was like, okay, fine. And so it was just a joke. Like literally we wrote like, okay, he has to be tall, at least over 6 foot. He has to be ambitious. He has to love cooking. He has to be a professional. He has to be funny. Like all the stuff that we kind of wrote down. He has to love the ocean. Like it was all the stuff. And right at the bottom, my mom said, okay, well, I'm going to write he has to be blonde, because every person you've ever dated has had dark hair. And I think we're done with that now. So this person has to be blonde. And I went, Mom, that's ridiculous. Like I've never been attracted to anyone who's blonde. Like that's not going to happen. So she puts it on the list. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that my husband now walked in.
Oh my God.
And he was setting up his new chiropractic clinic, and he was looking for office furniture. And so I actually, just after I left school, studied interior design and worked in that for a short time. So I ran all the office furniture and setting up people's offices and getting stuff built and whatever. And so he came in, and I was showing him some stuff, and I was refusing to look at him in the face at all. And Tracy Chapman came on the stereo, and he went, oh, do you like Tracy Chapman? I love this song. And I went, oh yeah, me too. And I looked up and I looked at him, and we can both remember like that moment that we looked at each other, and we both remember the song. And it was like a bomb had gone off. Like it was just that, like I've never had that before. And so
I got goosebumps.
He came back twice that day. He told me that he didn't have a fax machine or an email that I could send his quotes to. He had to come back. And so it probably took us about, 8 months to actually go on a date, I guess. But he was coming back all that time. My dad thought it was fabulous because he was scoring big time financially off this clinic that was being set up. And so that was how I met my husband. And he's been such an absolute blessing in my life. And then a couple of years later, we got married, and then we had Savannah, our daughter, and she wasn't 4 weeks old. And she had a really, really high fever, and something just didn't feel right. And so I took her to the doctor. They rushed us to the hospital, and it turned out she had bacterial meningitis. And so we're still not sure how she got it. The first thing they asked me originally was, do we have snakes or lizards or something that we look after? Because supposedly they carry salmonella. And I feel, because it's a moment that's such a passing moment, but I still remember it so clearly. I was taking my elder daughter to school, and I was carrying Savannah, and a drop of water dropped from the roof of my parents' house into Savannah's eye. And such an arbitrary moment, but I remember it so clearly. And only after they said that did I remember that my parents had carpet pythons. They lived in like a forest area on the roof of their house. And I think that's how she got it. But anyway, so that started like 6 weeks of lumbar punches. And she's only 4 weeks old. Like she was teeny. 8 doses of antibiotics intravenously. She also got bronchiolitis while we were in hospital, because even though we were in separate rooms, I think perhaps one of the nurses may have brought it in from moving along through the ward. So couldn't breathe, plus all of this. And again, those lessons from childhood came into play, and my marriage, where I could not break down. I could not fall in a heap. Like I had to be strong. I had to keep going. I couldn't get involved in the what ifs or the statistics of kids in that situation. And so I just focused on right now, like what is happening right now? What do we need to do right now? And so we just made that a space. Like my strongest memory is really Savannah. She had to get a tube put in for her antibiotics to be put in directly into her chest. And she came out of that, and that was her first smile. And that's what I remember.
Wow.
And the little room that was so peaceful, we had soft music playing for her all the time. And she still, if she struggles to sleep, she puts that same soundtrack on, and she's 10.
Wow.
So somehow that, I feel that feeling helped her heal, I think. She's one of the only babies that we know of that not only came out of that with no damage, because we had to check for years that she wasn't going to be deaf and all sorts of stuff, but also came out fatter than she went in. Like she grew during that time. And I can just remember the peacefulness of her and I being together in that space. Brian was amazing. He came every single day to the hospital around his work, every lunchtime, every night he slept there. And so that's what's really strong for me in my head, is that moment of family and being together. And I know for him it was really stressful because he was looking at statistics and all that stuff. But I was not. I was just focusing on the day and the now, and what are we grateful for today, and what routine are we doing today.
And that's so powerful. I think just for anyone going through struggle at any point in their life, all we have is right now. And like you said, you can't go and run the story of what if and what could happen, and because not a lot of good is going to come from that. It's finding small pockets and moments of gratitude, and just all you can do is give presence and love in that moment, and keeping strong. And I can imagine there were probably many times that you just wanted to fall in a heap, but there was a bigger reason and purpose for you to be strong for your little one. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think in a way, yes. And yes, I mean, yes, it's amazing. But also I think by that point it had become almost impossible for me to fall in a heap.
Sure.
It wasn't a thing that was part of what I often hear other women say things like, I locked myself in my cupboard and I just cried, or I've never done that.
Yeah.
Like it's not something that's part of what I know how to do. If I ever felt to be in that space, I could only be there for a very little time. And then I go, well, this isn't helping. Like this isn't serving anybody. Stop being silly. Move on. Like, let's go. What's next? Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, and so it was something that just wasn't part of what I'd learned like my whole life.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, again, the next big challenge, I guess, for us, because things went on. Savannah got better. Her and I have struggled quite substantially with our health through the years, but I guess in the last 2 years, we found a way that our health is now amazing. Our immune systems are amazing. We've just celebrated our 2 years of health yesterday, which was very cool because neither of us have been sick. So that all went on great. However, this is where my little walls that I'd built up got challenged, because in my daughter's 16th, 17th year, she's always been a really sporty, happy, funny kid. And suddenly overnight, we went from that to literally being in the mental health unit of a hospital with her, very depressed, out of it's seemingly nowhere, just hit like a freight train. And I went from having a child that I had a really close relationship with, who I thought I knew everything about and every nuance of her personality, to someone who I did not know at all and who I couldn't connect with. And so a child that I, used to, now she does, and she's 19, sit on my lap, like literally, and just you know, some of those kids, they get to high school and they won't hold your hand or,
Yes.
you know, whatever. She was never that, right? She was just all over me more than anything else. I couldn't touch her suddenly. Like, and so that, those kind of walls that I'd built where I struggled to feel emotion became such a barrier in me understanding what she was going through, because I could not relate. My mom once said to me, I think, Yvette, you're immune to depression, because if you've never been depressed with everything that's gone on, clearly you can't be. And I don't know whether that's true or not, if anybody is immune to that, but it certainly made it very hard for me to understand, because I was just like, well, no, you can't just lie in your bed with the windows and doors closed. Like, get up, let's go. Like, let's move on. You know, yes, that sucked. Okay, let's move on. And that didn't work for her. It just didn't make sense. And so that was my first kind of little light that maybe this theme that I developed around myself wasn't going to serve me anymore in the space that I was in. And so even now, although I really struggle to understand depression and mental illness in general, even though I've lived with a few people over the years that struggled with it, I had to start opening that empathetic side of me again, where even though I don't understand, I still get you and it's still okay and we can still talk about it. And so there was a lot of realization there that she had not told me a lot of things because she didn't want to upset me. She was protecting me the whole time. I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be protecting you, like, you know. And so there was a lot of me trying to figure that out and her trying to figure that out. And again, as Savannah and I have gotten better over the last few years, my elder daughter has too. And so although she was on quite a lot of medication at one point, which we were not super happy about and looking for other healthy ways to help her, she now is no longer on any. She's studying in her passion job of being a paramedic, and coping with life really well. She has a couple of jobs. She just goes to uni. She is, again, her happy self.
Sitting
on yeah, and sitting on me again. Yes, which I love. And she's still hilarious. She's 19 years old. She still asks me if she can go out with her mates on the weekend.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. And then she's like, I don't know why I ask you, because I know that if I'm 19, I shouldn't be able to. But anyway, she still does. And I still say, yes, you may, as if I have a choice in it. But yeah, so she's amazing. And then, so that was my first little hint that this was not working, not serving me anymore. And then I started, because of the health journey I'd been going through with myself and Savannah, I started getting more into health coaching and coaching others. And again, I found myself, a lot of my focus in those sessions was about staying in control of my emotions, because people come to you for health coaching, and I found very often they'll come to you for weight loss. For example, their health is trashed, but what they're concerned about in the moment is their weight. But it's never about the weight. There's always a story. There's always a reason. There's always something deep underlying that's around that. And in trying to help them find that, there's always strong emotion around that. And so I realized I was struggling. I was focusing so much on trying to keep myself in check, to not cry as soon as they cried, that I couldn't help them as much as I wanted to. And so I had to, again, open up a little bit at that point. And then I found you, Kate. And then you and Anthony came into my life, and all the other amazing women that we work with every day. And again, a lot of those people, the whole thing that we do is about connection and about building relationships, and about understanding people, and about being able to get where they're at so we can work with them. And again, that's really hard to do if you're not open emotionally to do that. And so I think the first thing that made me realize that being vulnerable was not a bad thing was I did a Facebook Live. We were going to do a Tough Mudder, right, me and my husband. And so with my health, I've had Ross River fever and glandular fever, and my joints oftentimes Brian would have to even cut my food for me because I couldn't do it myself. And so we started training for this Tough Mudder. And for the first time I was training and I was not getting sick. And so I decided I was going to do a Facebook Live. It was not something I was really, something that I was used to doing, but I'd done some push-ups and I was able to do them. And I was super excited. My wrists weren't sore. And so I did this Facebook Live that started off with me being super excited about being able to do push-ups. And then I just started crying on Facebook Live. and I'm like, what do I do? Like, do I just switch it off? But there were all these people who were already watching me crying on Facebook. And it was like my worst nightmare. I was like, here I am, like, here's this vulnerability, but I'm doing it publicly in front of all of these people. This is horrendous. And I was so ashamed and so embarrassed. But the messages and the connections that I made from that one Facebook Live were mind-blowing to me. I was like, I don't understand. Like, these people are not going, what a weirdo is Yvette. They were like, I get it. I feel the same way. Like, I've had that too. Or, you know, whatever, all these questions, all this love, all these connections, and none of them were saying, oh, how weak are you? Do you know what I mean? And so I realized then, and through, I guess, our Empowered Women's Project, that, and the reason for that is because you're encouraged to do personal development, right? It's a personal development course in itself, just being part of the Empowered Women's Project. And so just digging deep into those feelings, forcing myself into that place. And I say force because I think sometimes I really had to, because it was very scary for me, has been such a revelation. And being able to find that vulnerability is such a huge strength. And the kind of intuitive spirit that I have and empathy that I have for other people is not a weakness. Has just been, a complete change. And I think even my closest friends who, bless their heart, when they first met me, thought I was a complete cow. Because I would go and I would do my stuff and I would drop my child off and I wouldn't really speak to anybody. I would smile politely, but I was very controlled and I was very, put together. And, and one of them kind of went, I don't think she's a cow. I just think maybe she's shy. Let's invite her for coffee. Again, just that, and suddenly I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that's what people were thinking of me.
Yes.
And so, bless their hearts, they're my best friends now. And they will say that specifically over the last 2 years, I'm a completely different person to who I used to be. I cry on Facebook regularly. I think it's become my thing. And I think that's because I'm still learning. I've gone from like controlling my emotions completely to opening that door, and suddenly there's like no control. My children say that my heart's too close to my tear ducts.
I love that.
That feels just, it comes out, and I'm okay with that now. And I think for me, the lesson has really been like that you have to use the tools that are in your arsenal, what you've learned through the years and through the bad times or the good times, all those things that you're learning as you grow, until they don't serve you anymore. And then you have to, sit for a minute, revise, rethink, and then find a new way forward. And so I think that's really what I've done. Something that I heard once was, and I'm pretty sure we were in Vegas together, and somebody said, you never lose, you either win or you learn. And I was like, wow, that's true. It's like, even in the darkest of times, you may not be winning, but you're learning something. And the universe is always teaching us.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it is, the universe or God, or however you work around those things. But in general, it always has your back. You know, I think if I hadn't been through the difficult times, if I hadn't met my ex-husband when I had, if I hadn't gone through all of that, I would never have been in the place that I was when my husband walked in.
Yeah.
I would have been somewhere else. If I'd have come with my parents before, I would have been somewhere else. Like if anything different had happened, I wouldn't have been there. And that was one of those massive turning points in my life where everything flipped and changed. And I wouldn't have been there if things hadn't taken me the way, and if it hadn't been for the lessons through my childhood and through, through my first marriage, I wouldn't have been able to cope when my child got sick.
Yes.
And so it's just those things that they just, that life kind of guides you through, and there's ups and downs, but there's something to learn from everything. And there's a blessing and a silver lining in everything, no matter what it is.
I love that, Yvette. And I love the saying that life happens for you, not to you. And your vulnerability and just sharing your story, most of which I had no idea about, may I just say, like you have been through so much, but just the way you've seen the beauty and the lessons along each of those paths. And maybe in that moment, of course, when things were happening, of course, you didn't see it that way, but just to be able to look back and see it all, like, I just want to honor you and thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability, because I know you've got me thinking about many things in my life, as I'm sure the same goes for our listeners. And I have a question for you, because I remember when I did first meet you, and I definitely got a hug with a pat. Like that was very much. Not anymore. I love you're a hugger. You just, there's so much love and emotion in you. I love to know what's changed over the last few years, particularly with you and your girls, because I think about, we obviously, our children are always watching us. They don't do what we tell them to do. They do what we do. And so it can be easy if we grow up with a certain influence in our life, whether it's a parent or someone significant, if they're a certain way to us or around us, that we might either emulate that or we rebel against it. So what's changed with you and the girls since you've started to become more okay with your own emotions and vulnerability?
I think my children are a lot more open with me. I'm a lot more open to sharing the bad things with the good. Yes. I think different for each child, because my children are such completely different ages.
Yeah.
I think my children know that I love them very much, because even though I thought they knew, and I think they've always known that I love them very much. It's not something that I used to say a lot.
Yes.
Because it made me emotional about how much I loved them. And so I was always, although I think both my girls always knew I would do absolutely anything for them, I was always slightly standoffish to a point, I guess. And so now I think we talk about everything. We talk about good days and bad. I'm more open to sharing my stories of when, things were not, I may have made a mistake as well.
Yes.
I'm much less judgmental. I'm also, I think for my eldest daughter, I tried to keep her to very different standards. I was like, you have to do your homework. You have to try and, I was always trying to make her a better person than I thought I was, or whatever that was, and make her what I expected her to be, not who she was, right? And so I think now both my kids know that whoever they are, whatever that looks like, whatever they want to do, whichever way they want to go in their life, I am completely okay with that, with them as they are. The good and the bad days and the emotions and the whatever, they don't have to hide anything from me. I might get sad in a moment, but it's okay. And that anything that happens in our lives, we can figure it out. Like together as a family, there is nothing we cannot figure out. Like nothing is not figure outable. So I think that's really helped, because now we kind of can talk around things much more openly. Sometimes I wish less openly, depending. But yeah, we have a really beautiful open relationship.
I love that.
And yeah, and so we still, like, my 19-year-old daughter and I, we speak a few times a day, even if she's not home. And we have a really beautiful, close relationship. And I love my kids.
That's so special.
Both amazing kids.
For the woman that's listening right now who maybe still feels like she's living life with her guard up, what would be, I don't know, something she could do, a book she could read, something she could listen to that could just help her start to take the first few steps to being okay with letting those emotions be seen by maybe someone else, where maybe that in the past they wouldn't have done that? What would you say to her?
I don't know about a book or a podcast, but what I would say is really important is to really take that time every day. And it sounds glib because it's being thrown around so much at the moment, but to really take time every day to find joy somewhere, to look for the joy and to look for the blessings. And I think if you're somebody who is in a situation where you still have to keep your guard up, to be okay with that right now,
yes,
but to still look for those people that you feel that you may be able to trust and may be able to speak to, and just try and open yourself a little bit, because it's not something that happens overnight. It's really a gradual process. And I think for people that are still living in that situation, it's survival mode, and that's cool. And so I think it's just to find those people. For me, my husband, one of my best friends, who see you and you feel, I can open a little here and feel it out. And I would really say, if you see that path, then take it in that moment. And for everybody, that's going to look a little different.
Amazing. Well, Yvette, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story and so many pieces of wisdom throughout that, and just the lessons that you've learned about yourself, and how I love what you said about every part. It serves you to a point, and then you have to be ready and willing to evolve and to let maybe the things that you did use and do to protect yourself or survive or move through challenging times, be okay to let go of that and be ready for that next evolution. And just seeing, the relationship that you have, the care and compassion that you have for other people is just so inspiring. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for allowing me to share it.
Wow, isn't she just a total sweetheart? I had no idea of about half of what she shared on today's episode, and just seeing the woman that she is, the care, the love that she has for others, but also being okay knowing that in our past, where there's been times where we might have had to put our walls up for whatever reason, seeing that as an evolution of ourselves, and just sometimes we might hang on to those things a little bit longer than we need to. And I just love the way that Yvette shared her story and her vulnerability and some of the things that she's been through, which, no woman should have to, but being able to see the good, find the good, look for what she can do to stay present and, be in the now and have that beautiful relationship that she does with her own family is just so special. So I hope that you had some takeaways from today, and I love to hear your feedback. To be able to connect with Yvette, you can follow her at The Tribal Mama, MAMA, on Instagram, and also we'll pop her other details into the show notes. But I really hope that you take away from this that the way you show up, the way you share your emotions, find those people that are in your life that you can lean into, that do have your back. If you might feel like you're in a situation at the moment where you do need to have those walls up, look for people around you that you can at least lean into that little bit, and know that it's only a temporary situation, and in time life will always show the beautiful lessons that it does. So thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to connecting with you on a future podcast. Have an amazing day.